Part 3 of the WikiLeaks dossier is diplomatic traffic as opposed to military traffic. And what it is a lot of cables, nearly 250,000 of them, of diplomats from around the world reporting back to Washington about their perceptions of the regions and countries they're in.
It's a bombshell. It's a historian's dream. It's a diplomat's nightmare because you see how the State Department works at the middle level. I mean, it doesn't have the most sensitive stuff, but it's still the most extraordinary window into how American diplomacy works.
At one level, as a former diplomat and a government employee, it's fascinating to be able to read someone else's telegrams, to read especially those called no foreign. No foreign means no foreign distribution, so no foreigner is supposed to see them. So it was interesting to see actually what good analysis the American diplomats had, how well informed they were, how well connected they were, and how much they knew about political situations.
We've seen big information releases like this previously, but what really strikes me about this information is that it is giving an idea of what's happening all around the world, not just from one country, but this is how the American government is operating in a number of countries.
What you've got in these cables is material that ranges from reports of really worldwide significance, for example, on the dangers of Pakistan developing nuclear weapons, very important sensitive issues, all the way down to what you might call diplomatic tittle-tattle, such as personality profiles of world leaders and a few disobliging remarks that are going to ruffle a few feathers.
We're talking on day one about Iran because a lot of that material seems most sensitive and most timely. So there's a wealth of material about discussions about Iran, not only reflecting American views, but reflecting back opinions about Iran from within the region. And I think some of the most interesting stuff is what the Arab states in the region truly think of Iran, which I think maybe they are reluctant to say publicly.
First of all, you have to understand how it came into existence. The United States has put together a huge electronic archive through something they call the SIPDIS, the Secret Internet Protocol Router Distribution Network. This is something that they brought in order to share information among US government agencies so that people knew what was going on a bit better, especially in the wake of 9/11. And therefore, these cables have been designed to be automatically loaded onto the website of other government agencies, such as the US military. The source of this material is the same source as the war logs in Iraq and Afghanistan that we published. It came from WikiLeaks, this group of activists, and it's alleged that the real source was an American soldier, Bradley Manning, who is currently in jail awaiting a court-martial, accused of leaking this kind of material.
I think anybody who's had what they thought of as a private conversation with an American diplomat over the last 5 or 10 years would be astonished to think that that information had been shared with 3 million others, so that young corporals in their 20s in Baghdad were able to access this stuff and read it, and as we now know, copy it.
The thing about digitization is it means that you don't have to take huge truckloads of paper out of a government body. It's really as simple as putting it on a data stick or a hard drive. Increasingly, information is a commodity, and where governments use information for power, it is much harder for them to monopolize that power because it can be dispersed so readily and rapidly.
I assume the State Department, the US government, is going to take a very close look at its procedures for disseminating this material and tighten up, actually. So I think that's one thing that's going to happen.
These cables are being published by The Guardian together with other international media organizations, the New York Times, Der Spiegel, the German magazine, El País in Spain, and Le Monde in France have also joined in. And we're all publishing a selection from these cables in a kind of partnership. It's similar to the partnership that we had earlier when we published the Afghan war logs and the Iraq war logs.
There may, of course, in those telegrams be revelations that do actually endanger lives in countries that aren't democracies, in the former Soviet Union, for example, or in some of the Arab world, where if the sources were known, they would be in very, very serious trouble and very serious danger. So I think there is a risk to people's lives somewhere in those telegrams, but not the ones that I saw.
So we've been able to harness our foreign correspondents who had themselves great knowledge of the region, who have been able to say, well, actually, that's terribly interesting, but not very reliable, or that's not really in the public interest. So we've been able to filter what we consider to be the most significant bits of information. And of course, the number of cables that we're actually using, the raw data, is a few hundred out of 250,000 that are sitting on this database. So we've been very selective.
Data deluge is coming, and it's about, I think what governments need to do is change their relationship to citizens. They need to stop thinking that if knowledge is power, only they are able to access it, and they sort of dribble it out as fits their needs. They need to sort of look at the citizen more as a partner, more as an equal, and really think about, does all this information need to be classified? And I would say a lot of these documents, it doesn't.
It's the kind of thing that's never been leaked before, and it's liable to cause a worldwide diplomatic crisis for the United States. And not only for the United States, but for many of the countries which contain harsh judgments or disclosures that we see in these cables. So I think there are going to be shockwaves around the world.
I think Britain actually should take a long, hard look at itself in the mirror of these documents, because what we're told is that we have these illusions about the special relationship, which clearly American diplomats themselves don't believe. So why are we clinging to those illusions?
It's very hard to provide frank advice for people back home if you know it's going to be splayed all over the place. So I think it won't change the way diplomacy is done. I think that people will change their systems. They'll try and keep their secrets as they have for hundreds of years. That's the only way you can really have a frank dialogue. But it would be nice if the dialogue in public was also well informed.